My friend said one sentence, and it changed the next year of my life. When the world finally learns what the One Piece is, it'll be the biggest spoiler in anime history. That's it. That's the whole sentence. But the real reason I started watching is far stranger than one line of dialogue from a friend. People have been telling me to watch One Piece for years before that. Multiple friends, random comments online. That one coworker who brings it up every single time anime comes up in conversation. I'd heard the pitch 100 different ways. Best story in anime. Most rewarding payoff you'll ever watch. None of it moved me. So why did this particular sentence from this particular friend finally do what 100 other recommendations couldn't? I hesitated anyway. 1,000 episodes. Say that number slowly. 1,000. Most shows ask for a weekend of your life. This one was asking for a lifestyle change before I'd even watched a single frame. I thought about every show I'd started and abandoned halfway through. Every book left on a shelf with a bookmark frozen at chapter 4. And I felt that same old doubt creeping in. Maybe One Piece just wasn't for me. Maybe that's exactly why every other recommendation had failed to land, because some part of me had already quietly decided this particular story was too big to start. That's when my friend said the second thing. Not as big as the first line, but somehow it hit harder. If you didn't try, you'd regret it. Simple. Almost annoyingly simple. The kind of thing people say about gym memberships and job interviews, not about 1,000-episode anime. But it worked on me anyway, because underneath the joke about the runtime, I already suspected they were right. I knew exactly what regret felt like. I'd felt it before, listening to people talk about something I'd written off, wondering what I was actually missing out on. So I decided to go all in. October 2024. The anime had gone on hiatus, which should have been the worst possible time to start, and instead became the exact reason I actually did. No new episodes meant no falling behind. No falling behind meant no excuse left to hide behind. I opened episode 1 already outnumbered by my own doubts, and I started anyway. The early episodes are simple, almost deceptively so. A boy in a straw hat. A goofy dream about becoming the Pirate King. I'd heard the ridicule online, the jokes about how slow it starts, and for a moment I understood exactly what they meant. But I kept going, because my friend's voice was still sitting in my head, and because quitting now would prove the doubt right before the story even had a real chance to prove it wrong. Then something shifted quietly, without announcing itself. I couldn't point to the exact episode where it happened. It wasn't one dramatic scene, it was more like a tide coming in, slow enough that I didn't notice until I was standing in deeper water than I expected. The joke stopped feeling like filler and started feeling like family. The villains stopped being simple obstacles in a treasure hunt and started carrying real weight, real histories, real reasons for becoming who they were. I started caring, not because the show demanded it of me, but because it had earned that care one small choice at a time. 6 months. That's how long it took me to finish the entire anime, start to finish, over 1,000 episodes. In 6 months. Ask anyone who's actually watched One Piece from episode 1 how long that usually takes people, and you'll understand why that number matters. I wasn't grinding through it out of obligation, checking episodes off a list like chores. I was pulled through it, one arc at a time, faster than I ever expected to be pulled through anything with that many hours attached to it. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I hit Marineford. If you know, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the arc most fans point to as the moment the entire story shifts gears. The one where the stakes stop being about pirates chasing treasure across an ocean and start being about loss, about war, about a boy watching the people he loves pay a price he can never take back no matter how strong he becomes. It became my favorite arc without any real competition. Not because it was the most exciting, though it absolutely was, but because it was the first time the show made me feel something I couldn't just shake off once the episode ended. I sat there afterward and didn't move for a while. I stared at a paused screen, replaying what I'd just watched, trying to figure out why a cartoon had left me feeling like that. That doesn't happen with a show about pirates, except apparently it does. By the time the anime returned from its hiatus, I'd already finished it entirely, all 1,000+ episodes on my own timeline, well ahead of schedule. And finishing it didn't feel like an ending the way finishing most shows does. It felt like reaching the edge of a map and realizing there was clearly more world past it, more story the anime simply hadn't caught up to yet. I wanted more, not eventually, immediately. So the moment the anime ended for me, I opened the manga. Same week, maybe even the same day. And that's a strange thing to do if you actually think about it. I had just spent 6 months and over 1,000 episodes on this story. Most people would need a break after that. A palate cleanser. Something completely different to reset with. I didn't want a break. I wanted the version of this story that moved faster than the anime ever could. The version where I could find out what happens next without waiting for another episode to render. I went straight from one form of the story into another without pausing, because by then I wasn't just watching a show anymore. Was I ever really just watching a show to begin with? That's the part people underestimate about One Piece. It isn't really one story told in one format. It's a world you can enter from either direction, and once you're standing inside it, the format stops mattering. Anime, manga, it didn't matter to me by that point. What mattered was the next chapter, the next arc, the next piece of a puzzle that had somehow become more important to me than shows I'd been watching for years. That's the twist I didn't expect when I first heard that sentence about the biggest spoiler in anime history. I assumed the risk was wasting my time. 1,000 episodes is a real investment, and investing wrong feels like a kind of failure you don't get to take back. But the actual risk was never wasted time. The actual risk was becoming the kind of person who couldn't imagine a normal week without checking in on this world. Every twist rearranged how I thought about loyalty. Marineford alone rearranged how I thought about loss. About what it costs to protect the people you love when you're not strong enough yet to actually do it. Here's the part where this stops being just my story and starts being yours too. I almost didn't start, remember? I had a perfectly reasonable excuse sitting right there in front of me. 1,000 episodes, too big, too much, not for me. And it wasn't like nobody had tried to get me there sooner. Multiple people had already told me to watch it more than once over the years. None of it worked until one sentence from one friend landing at exactly the right moment finally did. Somewhere in your life right now, there's probably something like that. Something people keep telling you to try. Something you keep quietly putting off, not because you don't believe them, but because the sheer size of it feels like proof you shouldn't even bother starting. My friend's advice wasn't really about anime, if you think about it. If you didn't try, you'd regret it. That sentence doesn't care what you're deciding whether to start. It applies just as easily to whatever you're avoiding right now as it did to episode 1 of a show I'd already been told to watch a dozen times before I actually listened. And here's the uncomfortable part of that mirror. It wasn't really the size of One Piece that almost stopped me. It was the fear of committing to something big and being wrong about it. That's rarely what actually stops people from starting the things they want to start. It's not the workload. It's the fear of investing real time into something and discovering halfway through that it wasn't worth it, after all. I felt that exact fear about things far more important than an anime. A goal I put off for a year longer than I needed to. A conversation I avoided having because I didn't know how it would end. The pattern is always the same. We measure the size of the commitment instead of the size of the regret waiting on the other side of never trying at all. So here's the real question underneath all of this. The one that started this whole story and somehow still hasn't been fully answered. What made me finally press play when 100 other recommendations from 100 other people couldn't? Was it really just a sentence about spoilers, Or was it something quieter? Some small readiness in me that had simply been waiting for the right person to say it the right way at the right time. Maybe that's what my friend actually gave me that day. Not new information about a story I'd already heard about. Permission to stop hesitating. I went from someone who thought 1,000 episodes was too much to ever finish, to someone who finished them in 6 months and immediately wanted more, immediately opened the manga, immediately kept going. That's not really a story about runtime. That's a story about what happens the moment you stop measuring the size of a thing and start measuring the size of your regret if you never try it at all. So I keep coming back to that one sentence. The biggest spoiler in anime history. It sounded like a warning at the time. It turned out to be an invitation, and now I want to know something. How did you start watching One Piece?